And I will say, I have never had more fun in my entire banking career as I'm having right now. And part of it is working for Happy State Bank and laughing and having fun, but also being able to put together an organization that represents the values that I hold dear to me. And that is family first, community, and my job. And the folks that we've associated with at the bank all feel the same way.
Welcome in, everyone, to LoneStarVarsity.com. This is the Happy State Bank Football Fever, an inside look at high school football on the South Plains. I'm Zach Long with George Watson. And George, last week, some interesting games. We see Coronado suffer its first loss, and Friendship survives another, I guess, what do you say, the heart attack moment possibly for the fans?
Yeah, absolutely. We knew Coronado was going to be in a tough tussle with San Angelo Central. Central had put up all kinds of yards and points and had just been mowing through everybody. Now, they didn't exactly do what they did to everybody to Coronado, but they showed exactly why they are one of the favorites in this district. Mickey Scott, the outstanding quarterback, was just fabulous running the football, throwing the football, and it was a 35-0 game before Coronado really had a chance to breathe. And so Coronado, I think they're still going to be there, fighting for a playoff spot at the end of the season, but I think they also show that they have a little bit of work to do. They need more balance in the offense and some defensive holes they got to fill up. And then you mentioned Friendship, an absolute thriller there in El Paso against El Dorado. A big gamble by Brad Davis. It was in overtime. They scored the touchdown to pull, then one. They kicked the extra point, and it's actually tied. They're about to go to the second overtime, and El Dorado's called for offsides. Well, that's a gamble right there. Do you take the tying point off the board because you're getting a yard and a half closer? Well, Brad Davis said, yeah, you know what? I got a play that I can get a yard and a half on. He called the same exact play that they scored the touchdown on, and it got a yard and a half. Parker Bingham got in the end zone. Friendship escapes, and literally, I mean escapes, because they were down 24-7 at one point in that game. They escaped with a 39-38 win, keep their record unblemished.
And we'll get into that later in the show with our game of the week. That's probably not going to cut it this week with their opponent.
No, probably not. Not with Amarillo, which actually lost in double overtime on the same kind of deal. They went for two and actually missed. So yeah, they're going to be a little angry at the Sandstorm coming into Friendship on Friday.
George, let's take a look at our top performer from last week. And I guess the phrase I'm going to use here is scoring versatility. VJ Gamez from New Deal.
Yeah, VJ Gamez is an outstanding outstanding athlete at New Deal. Just had an all-around great game. Had 99 yards rushing and a touchdown. And that's the thing. You've got four backs at New Deal that none of them are really just going to accumulate a lot of yards. But you look up by the end of the night, New Deal's got 300 rushing yards. So it really is a collective running back group there at New Deal. But not only did he have a good night rushing, he also returned an interception, 44 yards for a touchdown, returned a kickoff, 89 yards for a touchdown as New Deal rolls to a 3-0 start. They beat Lamesa 64-24, a good night for VJ.
Got to wonder if the kid had any energy left after that game. Good God.
And having to play offense and defense, at those small schools, and that's the thing. I'm sure one of the advantages of having that running back by committee at New Deal is they keep rotating in guys fresh, and they keep guys fresh on defense. So yeah, they've got a lot of good athletes, a really good team out there in New Deal.
And he can score special teams touchdowns when you save that energy.
Exactly.
George, I'm starting to think our AJ Media Top 5 is quite frankly a kiss of death. More anarchy in this week, and I see a lot of antelopes in this week's Top 5.
Yeah, there's a lot of antelopes, a lot of wildlife there in the top
exactly.
5. Friendship barely hangs on to the number 1 spot by their win. Shallowater moves up to number 2 by their victory. Estacado drops out of the top 5. Their loss, and it's a tough loss to take at Caprock because they had a 26-17 lead, gave up a touchdown, fumbled the kickoff, gave up another touchdown, and so in a matter of minutes they went from leading to trailing and having to try to catch up, and they just couldn't make it up. But then you've got the Lions of New Deal, and another one that coming out of the jungle. They move up to number 3, and then a couple of antelopes. Post moves up to number 4. Abernathy at 2-0 after their big win over Sundown this past weekend moves up to number 5.
And Abernathy, they'll get Canadian this week, and that'll be a gauge on that team right there.
Yep.
George, let's look at our Happy State Bank Players of the Week. Let's start first with our male athlete of the week from Roosevelt.
Yeah, Derek Coppage, the outstanding quarterback at Roosevelt. I said last week on this show that Roosevelt looks like they're about to figure some things out with their offense and get things rolling, and they certainly did. They took and beat a really good Tahoka team 56-12. Derek Coppage was outstanding, threw for 430 yards, 6 touchdowns, and the thing that Coach Pointer talked to me about is his intelligence and his ability to check. He'll give him 2 or 3 checks on the plays that he can audible to, and sometimes he'll audible to a play that is not even on the list, and it works for a touchdown. So the way that he's starting to run that offense and get that offense clicking at Roosevelt, they're liable to be a pretty tough team and a big team to watch here down the stretch.
Yeah, you get an outstanding quarterback, and it's amazing how the spread offense instantaneously opens up. On the female side of it, how about Hannah McCarty from Shallowater?
Yeah, Hannah McCarty, outstanding hitter from Shallowater, had a couple of good games with some kills and digs. She actually leads Shallowater in kills and digs on the season. And the thing about it is, she's only 5'6", and she's playing at the net at outside hitter. But she's got some incredible leaping ability that she has really worked on the last 2 years. Had a bit of a down year last year because she was battling through some illness, and it really knocked her down physically. She lost about 15 pounds, but she started to get that back now. She's starting to play at the level that she needs to play at, and really is doing a good job driving the Shallowater volleyball team.
George, that's a look at last week. Let's go ahead and move on. And we've got some good games this week. Let's look at 5 of them and see what we prognosticate with these matchups. Let's start first with the in-city one. Randall visits Monterey.
Yeah, and just interesting game here from Monterey. Welcoming Randall in. Randall normally would be a tough opponent, but Randall is not the Randall that it has been the last few years. They're kind of rebuilding. They're working in some new people, but Monterey really struggling. They went to El Paso against Americas, gave up 63 points. They scored 35, but most of that was after the game was well out of hand. So Monterey's still working through its issues. I continue to say it's on the offensive and defensive line. They've got the talent out there. Vincent Johnson ran for over 200 yards and a touchdown against America. So they've got him back there. Trayvon Benton was hurt early in the game. Not sure what his status is going to be for the game. But if Monterey can just find a way to stop somebody defensively, they'll have a chance. I just don't think it's going to happen in this game. I think Randall comes in, ekes out a win. It's going to be close, but I think Randall comes in and gets the win on the road.
Next up, George, Estacado tries to get back on track. They visit Schneider.
Yeah, I imagine Estacado is going to go into this week into this week of practice pretty angry after giving up what they thought they should have had a victory at Caprock. And they go up against a Schneider team that itself is struggling. Schneider's been able to put up some points. They just haven't been able to stop anybody, and that's going to be a problem when they're going up against Robert Johnson, who I was looking through the stats yesterday, has already rushed for more yards and has more touchdowns than he did when he got injured week 4 last year. So you can tell that he's on a roll right now, for that offense, and he's back. I think Estacado goes on the road to Schneider, their final road game before they get to play at home. They're going to go to Schneider and get a win.
Next up, an always interesting matchup, the aforementioned Roosevelt Eagles at Muleshoe.
Yeah, the reason this one is interesting is both teams run the same exact offense, and that's because Coach Pointer and some of his staff was at Muleshoe when they came to Roosevelt a few years ago. Normally, they haven't had very much success against Muleshoe in this game in the past, but I think they will this year because they have the more veteran team. Muleshoe, I think, is still trying to work through some of its youth. They had a 14-0 lead on Level End and gave up 20 unanswered points, and Level End came back and won 20-14. I think the way Roosevelt is playing offense, I think they're just going to be too much for Muleshoe to stop. I like the Eagles to go on the road to Muleshoe and win this one.
And the game we mentioned earlier, traditional powerhouse Canadian visits Abernathy.
Yeah, another team in Canadian that does a good job in throwing the football, and they run a high-power, quick strike, the no-huddle offense. But Abernathy, I think, has a solid defense to be able to handle that enough to allow their offense to be able to do what they do. Garrett Royal is playing outstanding as a quarterback at Abernathy. They've got some really good running games. I think Abernathy, this is one that they really probably will tell you they should have had last year on the road at Canadian and let get away. I don't think they're going to let that happen again. I'm going to take the Antelopes in this one.
Next up, George Farwell, next in line to take a shot at the New Deal Lions.
Yeah, the Steers of Farwell are quietly putting together a pretty good season. They're undefeated at this point, and they're doing a lot of good things, but I just think New Deal right now just has too much for anybody. Their running game, they can run 4 guys out there and keep a running back fresh, running behind an outstanding offensive line. And then the real difference between this year and last year is they're playing really good defense this year. You know, last year they were giving up a lot of yards and a lot of points. They held Lamesa to 24 points, which is saying something with the way Lamesa plays offense. So I want to go with New Deal in this one. I think they're just going to be too much for Farwell.
Okay, let's move on now to our Happy State Bank game of the week. A good one, George. The battle for I-27, so to speak. Friendship and Amarillo out at Wolforth. Yeah,
we mentioned earlier in the show, these two teams coming in off of pretty similar games, just opposite results. Friendship gets the 2-point conversion to win 39-38 in overtime at El Dorado. Amarillo loses a heartbreaker in double overtime, 45-44 to Wichita Falls Rider at home to suffer their first loss. Really, these two teams couldn't be any more similar coming into the football game. They both play good defense. They're both putting up some points and some yards offensively. I think the difference here is going to be Friendship's balance. Amarillo, runs the ball, runs very well out of Mel Maxfield's wings tee, and does a really good job of it. And they threw the ball some against Rider when given the opportunity, but it's not one of their strong suits. And I think Friendship's defense is going to be ready for that. And then I think if Trevor Uhlenbach can go out and have the kind of game that he's capable of, the kind of game he had against Permian, the kind of game that he had at times against El Dorado, then I think Friendship is going to be in better shape. I think Friendship, having escaped El Dorado last week, is going to be on its game, is going to be very focused. I think it's going to be a close game. It could be another overtime game. We hope not for deadline purposes, but I think Friendship takes this one at home.
Should be a good atmosphere out there in Friendship. We'll also be out, George, of course, at Randall versus Monterey, and the one we talked about a little bit earlier, the good one I'm looking forward to, Canadian at Abernathy. And we'll have those and, of course, a ton more scores and all kinds of good stuff online over at LoneStarVarsity.com and LubbockOnline.com. Those are your homes for complete coverage of high school football and other high school athletics. That's going to do it, though, for this episode of the Happy State Bank Football Fever. For George Watson, I'm Zach Long. We'll see you out there Friday.